The coffee was cold again. Captain Renat Akafer stared at the brown liquid in her mug and sighed. 3 years aboard the UES Iron Precedent and the coffee machine on Deck 4 still could not make a decent cup. She had filed 17 maintenance requests. 17. The machine remained broken, and the coffee remained terrible. She took a sip anyway. A captain did what she had to do. The Iron Precedent was a mid-tier destroyer in the United Earth Fleet. It was not the biggest ship. It was not the fastest. It was not the kind of ship that made it into recruitment posters. But it worked, and the crew of 430 men and women who lived inside it knew how to do their jobs. That was enough for Renat. The ship was stationed near the Galactic Neutral Zone, a stretch of empty space that sat between human territory and the border of the Dominion of Cathari. The Cathari were tall, gray-skinned warriors with 4 arms and eyes like black glass. They had been locked in a cold war with humanity for over 40 years. No shots fired. No peace signed. Just 2 powers staring at each other across a line in the stars, each one daring the other to blink. Renat had never fought the Cathari. She hoped she never would. She had read the reports from the older conflicts, and they were enough to keep anyone awake at night. But today was not about the Cathari. Today was about paperwork. She sat in her command chair on the bridge and opened the morning briefing on her datapad. Orders from CENTCOM, Earth's Central Military Command. She read them twice to make sure she understood. "Haruki," she said. Commander Haruki Tanaka, her executive officer, looked up from his own station. He was a thin man with sharp eyes and a calm voice that never seemed to change no matter what was happening around him. Renat had once watched him give damage control orders during a reactor scare with the same tone he used to order lunch. "Captain, we have orders for a full combat readiness drill, standard Type 7 exercise. CENTCOM wants us to test the new Integrated Fleet Tactics package. Fighters, Marines, electronic warfare, the whole show." Tanaka raised an eyebrow. "Out here, in the middle of nowhere." "The Varath system. It is close, it is empty, and it is boring, perfect for a drill." "When?" "Today. They want the results by end of week." Tanaka nodded slowly. He did not look excited, but then again, he never looked excited. "I will inform the department heads. Should I tell the crew to expect anything special?" Renat shook her head. "It is a standard drill, nothing fancy. Tell them to do what they always do, just do it well." The word spread through the ship like water through a cracked pipe. Within an hour, everyone knew. The Marines groaned because drills meant running in full armor. The pilots grinned because drills meant flying. The engineering crew shrugged because no matter what happened, they would be the ones fixing things afterward. Down in the Marine Bay, Sergeant Major Cole Briggs stood in front of his people and explained the situation. Briggs was a large man with a shaved head and hands that looked like they had been carved from stone. He had served in the Earth Marines for 22 years and had the scars to prove it. His voice could carry across a landing zone in a thunderstorm. "Listen up," he said. "We are running a boarding repulsion scenario. That means drop pods, zero-gravity movement in close quarters. Foam rounds only. If I catch anyone loading live ammunition, I will personally throw them out of the airlock. Are we clear?" "Clear, Sergeant Major," 40 voices shouted back. "Good, suit up. We launch in 90 minutes. In the fighter bay, the pilots of Hellcat's squadron were already climbing into their ships. Lieutenant Commander Dara Yoon, the squadron leader, ran through the mission briefing on her helmet display. Standard intercept patterns, defensive screen formation, nothing they had not done 100 times before. "Same old dance," her wingman said over the private channel. "Same old dance," Dara agreed. "But let us make it look good. I want top scores this quarter." On the electronic warfare deck, Lieutenant Priya Vassant was having the best morning of her life. Priya was small, dark-haired, and had the kind of energy that made people tired just by watching her. She had spent the last 3 months building a new jamming algorithm, and this drill was the perfect chance to test it. "This algorithm will blind anything within 5,000 kilometers," she told her team, her eyes bright with excitement. "Every frequency, every band, every signal. If it sends a message, we kill it. If it receives a message, we kill it. If it even thinks about sending a message, we kill it before it finishes thinking." Her team exchanged glances. They were used to Priya's enthusiasm, but even by her standards, this was a lot. "Is it safe?" one of them asked. "Define safe," Priya said with a grin. The drill began at exactly 1100 hours, ship time. Alarms rang through every corridor. Red lights flashed. The iron precedent came alive like a sleeping animal that had been poked with a stick. Fighters launched from the bay in pairs, their engines leaving bright trails against the black of space. Marine drop pods fired from the ship's belly, carrying armored soldiers toward a derelict freighter that had been placed in the system as a training prop. The electronic warfare suite powered up, and Priya's new algorithm reached out into the void like invisible fingers, grabbing every signal it could find and crushing it into silence. On the bridge, Renaa watched the displays and felt a small glow of pride. Her crew was good. They were not perfect, but they were good, and they worked together like the parts of a well-oiled machine. "Looking sharp," Tanaka said quietly beside her. "Looking sharp," she agreed. It was a simple drill, nothing more, nothing less. But 600,000 kilometers away, hidden in the shadow of a dead moon just beyond the border, 12 warships watched in silence. Their sensors recorded everything. Their crews stared at their screens with wide, dark eyes. Warlord Tyson Kett stood on the bridge of the Throat of Silence, the flagship of the Kethari 9th Vanguard Fleet. He was tall even by Kethari standards, with gray skin stretched tight over a warrior's frame and 4 arms clasped behind his back. His black eyes reflected the glow of the tactical display in front of him. He had brought 12 ships to this border, 12 ships to test the humans, to probe their defenses, to find a weakness. His sensor officer turned to him, and Kett could see the fear already forming in the young officer's eyes. "Warlord," the officer said, his voice tight. "The humans have mobilized, full combat deployment, fighters, ground forces, and they are jamming us. Our communications with the outer ships are failing." Kett said nothing for a long moment. He stared at the display, watching the tiny human ship move with a speed and purpose that made his stomach turn cold. "They know we are here," he said quietly. No one on the bridge argued with him. Warlord Tyson Kett had spent 30 years studying humans. He had read every report. He had watched every recording. He had interviewed prisoners, analyzed battle data, and spent long nights staring at tactical maps trying to understand how a species so young, so fragile, so soft-bodied could be so impossibly dangerous. The Kethari were born warriors. Their bones were dense. Their skin was thick. They had 4 arms, each one strong enough to bend metal. Their children learned to fight before they learned to speak. War was not just their history. It was their religion, their culture, their identity. And yet, in 40 years of Cold War, not a single Kethari commander had ever won a decisive engagement against humans. Not one. Kett had believed he would be different. He had planned this incursion for months. His intelligence officers had mapped every human patrol route in the sector. They had identified gaps in the sensor network. They had chosen the Varath system because it was empty, unguarded, and far from any major human base. It was supposed to be a quiet probe, slip across the border, test the defenses, gather data, slip back before the humans could respond. Instead, the humans were already there, already fighting. Kett watched the tactical display with the focus of a predator that had suddenly realized it was the prey. The human destroyer had launched fighters in a perfect defensive screen. The formation was tight, disciplined, and covered every approach angle to the ship. There were no gaps, no weaknesses, no openings. The fighter pattern, his tactical officer said, her voice strained. It matches their doctrine for Delta, a defensive intercept screen designed for situations exactly like this. They are positioned to counter a fleet-scale approach from our direction. Ket felt his jaw tighten. Doctrine for Delta. He knew it well. He had studied it in detail. It was one of the most effective fighter deployment patterns the humans had ever developed, and they were running it with the kind of smoothness that came only from long practice. And the ground forces, he asked. Marine drop pods have deployed to the asteroid field nearby. They are setting up defensive positions on multiple rocks. The deployment pattern matches their Doctrine 7 Alpha. 7 Alpha. Ket closed his eyes for a moment. Doctrine 7 Alpha was a boarding repulsion strategy specifically designed to counter Cathari tactics. The humans had created it after studying how Cathari warriors fought in close quarters. It used the asteroids as choke points, forcing attackers into narrow approaches where human firepower could do the most damage. They had not just mobilized. They had mobilized against him, against the Cathari, against this exact type of attack. Warlord, his communications officer called out. We have lost contact with the Burning Dawn and the Fist of Coral. The human jamming is too strong. We cannot reach them on any frequency. 3 of his 12 ships were now cut off, blind and deaf in hostile space. The jamming was not just broad. It was targeted. It was hitting the exact frequencies the Cathari fleet used for internal communication, as if the humans had mapped their entire communication system and built a weapon specifically to destroy it. In truth, Priya Vasan had done nothing of the sort. Her algorithm was designed to jam everything. It did not care what species was sending the signal. It did not care what frequency was being used. It simply reached out and killed every electromagnetic whisper within range with the blind enthusiasm of a child stomping on ants. The fact that it was perfectly disrupting Cathari fleet communications was pure coincidence. But Ket did not know that, and coincidence to a military mind under pressure looks exactly like planning. On the bridge of the Iron Precedent, Captain Renat Akafer was having a perfectly normal afternoon. Hellcat Squadron, your intercept timing on approach Vector 7 was 2 seconds slow, she said into the comms. Tighten it up on the next run. Copy that, Iron Precedent. Dara Yoon's voice came back crisp and professional. Adjusting now. Renat checked the scores on her display. The drill was going well, better than well. The fighters were performing 12% above their baseline scores. The Marines had secured the derelict freighter in record time. Briggs had reported that his team cleared all 6 decks in under 9 minutes, which was nearly 2 minutes faster than the fleet average. And Priya's jamming suite was performing beyond anyone's expectations. Captain, Tanaka said, leaning over from his station. Lieutenant Vasan's algorithm is putting out numbers I have never seen before. She is jamming across a wider band than any system in the fleet. CENTCOM is going to want this. Good, Renat said. Tell her to keep pushing it. I want to see what the maximum range looks like. Tanaka passed the order, and somewhere on the yield deck, Priya Vasan let out a small cheer and turned the power up even higher. The invisible wave of silence around the Iron Precedent grew wider and stronger, reaching further into space, crushing more signals, blinding more sensors. 600,000 kilometers away, the Cathari fleet felt it like a tightening fist. We have now lost contact with 4 ships, the communications officer reported. His hands were shaking. The jamming is increasing in strength. Warlord, if this continues, we will lose fleet cohesion entirely. Ket turned to his intelligence officer, a thin Cathari named Sarath who had spent his entire career studying human behavior. Your assessment. Sarath was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and careful. The humans are not just defending, Warlord. They are demonstrating. Every move they make is calibrated. The fighter screen tells us they know we are here. The Marine deployment tells us they know how we fight. The jamming tells us they can take away our ability to communicate whenever they choose. You believe this is a message. I believe this is a warning. They are showing us what they can do. They are giving us the chance to leave before they are forced to show us what they will do. Ket stared at the display. The human destroyer was small, a mid-tier ship, nothing special, and it was operating alone. No support fleet, no reinforcements visible on any sensor. One ship, and it had already blinded a third of his fleet, deployed forces that matched his exact tactical profile, and established a defensive position so strong that attacking it would cost him half his ships at minimum. One ship, running a routine operation, with a crew that moved like water flowing downhill, smooth and natural, and completely without hesitation. That was what scared him the most. There was no panic in their movements, no urgency, no sign that they were reacting to a sudden threat. They moved like people who had done this 1,000 times before, like people for whom combat readiness was not an emergency state but a default setting. His sub-commanders were already sending private messages to the flagship. Commander Revan of the Burning Dawn, before communications were lost, had transmitted a single line. "This is a trap. We should withdraw." Commander Pella of the Storm Walker had been more direct. "My crew is afraid. I cannot guarantee they will fight." The morale of his fleet was crumbling, and not a single shot had been fired. Ket placed all 4 of his hands on the edge of the tactical display and leaned forward. He was a warrior. He had bled on 6 different worlds. He had led charges that broke enemy lines and held positions that everyone said could not be held. But he was also not a fool. A fool attacked an enemy who was ready for him. A fool threw lives away for pride. A fool looked at a steel wall and ran at it headfirst because turning around felt like weakness. Ket was many things, but he was not a fool. "Maintain position," he ordered. "All ships hold. No one moves, no one fires. We watch and we wait." And so the Kethari 9th Vanguard Fleet sat in the dark, 12 warships crewed by thousands of warriors, and watched a single human destroyer practice fighting. They watched and they were afraid. The bridge of the throat of silence was quiet in the way a room full of frightened people is quiet. Not peaceful, not calm, just silent, because no one wanted to be the first to say out loud what everyone was already thinking. Warlord Ket stood at the center of it all and let the silence hang. He could feel the fear in his crew. It was a living thing, spreading from officer to officer like a disease. He needed to make a decision, but before he could decide what to do next, he needed to understand why his warriors, some of the finest in the Dominion, were ready to break. He already knew the answer. He had always known. It was not this ship. It was not this moment. It was everything that had come before. Ket closed his eyes, and the memories came without invitation. He had been a young officer during the Battle of Rithuan Crossing, serving on a supply ship behind the main line. The crossing was a narrow passage between 2 asteroid fields, and the Kethari High Command had sent 8 warships to take it. 8 ships against 1 human frigate. The commanders had laughed about it. 8 against 1. It would be over in minutes. It was not over in minutes. It was not over in hours. The human frigate was called the UES Blackwood. It was smaller than every Kethari ship in the fight. Its weapons were weaker. Its shields were thinner. By every measure that mattered, it should have been destroyed in the first exchange of fire. Instead, the Blackwood had wedged itself into the narrowest part of the crossing and refused to move. For 11 hours, it held the passage. Every time the Kethari pushed forward, the Blackwood pushed back. Its captain used the asteroids as shields, ducking behind them to repair damage and then swinging back out to fire again. When its main guns overheated, the crew rerouted power from life support to weapons and kept shooting in freezing darkness. When its port engine was destroyed, the crew patched the hull with emergency sealant and duct tape and kept the ship flying on one engine. 11 hours, 8 ships, one frigate. When reinforcements finally arrived from the human side, the Blackwood was barely holding together. Its hull was cracked in 40 places. Half the crew was injured. The captain had a broken arm and was giving orders from a chair welded to the deck because the command station had been destroyed. But the crossing was still in human hands. 3 Cathari ships were destroyed, 2 more were crippled, the rest had withdrawn. 8 against 1. And the one had won. Ket opened his eyes. That battle was 26 years ago, and the memory still made his stomach tight. But that was not the only story. The Cathari had a library of such stories, and every officer in the fleet knew them by heart. There was the Siege of Pale Station, an orbital platform on the edge of human space. A Cathari raiding force of 2,000 warriors had boarded the station, expecting to overwhelm the small human garrison. The station held only 500 Marines. The Cathari had 4 arms, superior strength, and centuries of close combat tradition. In any fair fight in close quarters, a Cathari warrior should defeat a human every time. It was not a fair fight. The humans had turned the station into a killing ground. They had sealed corridors, vented atmosphere in sections to create zero-gravity zones, and rigged every door with traps. The Marines fought in teams of 4, moving through the station like ghosts. They appeared from vents, from behind sealed doors, from maintenance shafts that the Cathari did not even know existed. In zero gravity, the Cathari advantage in strength meant nothing. Their heavy bodies became clumsy. Their 4 arms, so deadly in normal combat, became a weakness in the spinning chaos of weightless fighting. The humans, lighter and faster, moved through zero-G like they were born in it. The siege lasted 3 days. When it was over, the Cathari had lost over 1,400 warriors. The humans had lost 86. The station was damaged but still standing. 500 against 2,000, and the 500 had won. And then there was the story that every Cathari officer whispered about but no one wanted to discuss openly. The incident at Gorath's Vale. Gorath's Vale was a Cathari colony world, protected by a planetary defense grid. 60 orbital weapons platforms, linked by an encrypted network, capable of destroying any fleet that came within range. The grid was considered unbreakable. Cathari engineers had spent decades building it and had tested it against every known method of attack. A single human electronic warfare specialist, a woman named Lieutenant Sarah Chen, had been captured during a border skirmish and held on the planet's surface. During her captivity, using nothing but a stolen communications terminal and her own knowledge, she had infiltrated the defense grid's network. She did not just disable it. She turned it. She reprogrammed the targeting systems to lock onto Cathari military installations on the planet's surface. When the Cathari realized what was happening and tried to shut the grid down, they found that Chen had changed every access code, locked every override, and buried the changes behind layers of encryption so complex that their best programmers could not undo them for 6 days. By the time they regained control, a human rescue team had already arrived, collected Chen, and left. The entire planetary defense grid had been compromised, reconfigured, and used as a bargaining chip by one woman with a stolen computer. When Cathari intelligence later reviewed what Chen had done and estimated how long it must have taken her, the answer was approximately 4 hours. She had done it in an afternoon, between meals. The report noted that she had also used the terminal to send a personal message to her family during the process. One woman, one afternoon, one stolen computer, and an entire planet's defenses had fallen. These were the stories that lived in the bones of every Cathari officer, not just the battles themselves but what they meant, because the pattern was always the same. The humans were always outnumbered, always outgunned, always facing impossible odds, and they always found a way. They did not fight like the Cathari with strength and honor and direct confrontation. They fought like water. They flowed around obstacles. They filled every crack and gap. They adapted to every situation with a speed that should not have been possible, and they never, ever stopped. On the bridge of the Throat of Silence, Ket saw those stories reflected in the faces of his officers. Every one of them was running the same calculations in their head. Every one of them was looking at the tactical display, watching the human destroyer and its fighters and its marines and its wall of electronic silence, and comparing what they saw with what they knew. A young officer named Trell stood at the sensor station, his 4 hands gripping the console so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. Ket walked over to him. "Speak your mind," Ket said quietly. Trell swallowed. "Warlord, they are performing for us. They know we are watching. Every move, every formation, every signal they jam. It is a display. They are showing us what will happen if we cross that line." Ket looked at him for a long moment. "You may be right." "If we attack," Trell continued, his voice dropping to almost nothing, "we will be another story, another report in their files, another lesson they teach their young officers about what happens when someone challenges them." Ket put one hand on the young officer's shoulder. He could feel the trembling beneath the uniform. He turned back to the main display. The human destroyer was still there, still moving, still running its drill with the kind of easy confidence that made his blood run cold. Not because it was impressive, though it was, but because it was casual, relaxed, routine. This was not their best. This was their normal. Ket opened a channel to his fleet. The ships that could still hear him went silent, waiting. "I have studied humans my entire career," he said. "I have prepared for every scenario. I have trained for every outcome. But I never prepared for an enemy that fights this well when they do not even know they are fighting." He paused, and the weight of every story, every battle, every legend pressed down on his words. "If this is what they do for practice, what would they do to us for real?" No one answered. No one needed to. The drill was winding down. Captain Renat Akafer leaned back in her chair and allowed herself a small smile. The numbers on her display were good. Better than good. Hellcat Squadron had posted their highest intercept scores in 6 months. The Marines had cleared the training freighter with a speed and efficiency that would make CENTCOM sit up and take notice. And Priya's jamming algorithm had performed so far beyond projections that the electronic warfare team was already writing up the results for fleet-wide review. A good day, a simple, productive, uneventful day. "Hellcats are returning to the bay," Tanaka reported from his station. "All fighters accounted for. Marine pods are on approach for recovery. Sergeant Major Briggs reports no injuries, no equipment damage." "Perfect," Renat said. She picked up her datapad and began composing the after-action summary. CENTCOM wanted results by end of week, but there was no reason not to send them early. Good news traveled best when it traveled fast. Down in the Marine Bay, Briggs was supervising the post-drill cleanup. His people were pulling off their armor, stacking foam round magazines, and doing the 100 small tasks that came after every exercise. Training paint was splattered across chest plates and helmets in bright blues and oranges, marking where simulated hits had landed. "Not bad," Briggs said, which from him was the same as a standing ovation. "Corporal Diaz, your team was 3 seconds slow on Deck 4. Fix it." "Yes, Sergeant Major." "Everyone else, clean your gear and get some food. We earned it." In the fighter bay, Dara Yoon pulled off her helmet and ran a hand through her sweat-damp hair. Her wingman climbed out of the next cockpit and gave her a thumbs up. "Top scores," he said with a grin. "Top scores," she confirmed. "Drinks are on the squadron that came in last." On the U deck, Priya was staring at her screens with the look of someone who had just discovered something wonderful and could not wait to tell everyone about it. Her algorithm had jammed every frequency within 5,000 kilometers for the entire duration of the drill without a single dropout or failure. It was, by any measure, the most effective electronic warfare test in the history of the Iron Precedent. Lieutenant, one of her team members said, the power draw on the new algorithm was lower than projected too. We were running at 60% capacity. Priya's eyes went wide. 60%? We were not even trying hard. No, ma'am. Priya laughed. It was the happiest sound on the ship. The bridge was settling into the comfortable rhythm of a mission completed. Officers were filing reports. Stations were powering down from combat readiness to standard operations. Someone had put on music in the background, a soft jazz track that Renee pretended not to notice because regulations technically did not allow it, but she liked jazz and the crew had earned a little comfort. And then the comms officer, a young woman named Ensign Park, made a sound. It was not a word. It was not a gasp. It was the kind of sound a person makes when their brain receives information so unexpected that the body does not know how to react. A small, strangled noise that was half surprise and half confusion. Renee looked up. Ensign Park was staring at her console. Her face had gone pale. Captain, I am receiving a transmission on the universal surrender frequency. The bridge went quiet. The jazz kept playing for 2 more seconds before someone killed it. Say that again, Renee said. The universal surrender frequency, ma'am. Broad spectrum, unencrypted. It is coming from. Park checked her readings 3 times before she said the words. It is coming from multiple sources, at least 12. They are just outside the border. Tanaka was already at the tactical station. His hands moved across the controls with the calm precision that had earned him his reputation, but Renee could see the tension in his shoulders. Confirming, he said, 12 contacts are decloaking along the Cathari border, all warships, cruiser class and above. They are, he paused. They are powering down all weapon systems, dropping shields. They are going completely dark. 12 warships, 12 Cathari warships, hidden in the dark just beyond the border, close enough to have attacked at any time during the drill, close enough to have caught them with foam rounds in the guns and training paint on the armor. Renee's stomach dropped, and then it dropped again when she realized what could have happened, and then it dropped a 3rd time when the transmission began to play through the bridge speakers. The voice was deep. Translated in real time by the ship's computer, it carried the careful formality of a Cathari military officer, but underneath the formality was something else. Something that sounded very much like exhaustion. Human vessel. This is Warlord Tyson Kett of the Cathari 9th Vanguard Fleet. We entered this space with hostile intent. We have observed your preparations and your strength. We recognize that we were anticipated and outmatched. In accordance with the Pale Accords, I offer the unconditional surrender of my fleet, my ships, and my person. We ask only for the honor you have shown defeated enemies in the past. The message ended. The bridge was silent. Renee stared at Tanaka. Tanaka stared at Renee. Neither of them blinked for what felt like a very long time. From the yield deck, carried through the open intercom, came the sound of a coffee mug hitting the floor and shattering. Renee's mind raced. She was a captain in the United Earth Fleet. She had trained for dozens of scenarios. She had studied first contact protocols, emergency response procedures, and diplomatic engagement rules. But she had never once in her entire career trained for the scenario in which an enemy fleet surrendered to her during a drill she was running with foam bullets and training paint. There was no manual for this. There was no regulation. There was only this moment, this silence, and a decision that had to be made right now. She could feel every eye on the bridge watching her. She could feel the weight of everything that was about to happen pressing down on her shoulders. If she said the wrong thing, it could start a war. If she said the right thing, it could prevent one. She took a breath, then another. She straightened in her chair. She pressed the comms button. When she spoke, her voice was steady. It did not shake. It did not waver. Later, Tanaka would tell her that she sounded like she had been expecting this all along, like it was just another item on the day's agenda. She would never tell him how hard she had worked to make it sound that way. Warlord Ket, the United Earthship Iron Precedent acknowledges your surrender. You and your crews will be treated with the full dignity and respect provided under the Pale Accords. You have my word as an officer of the United Earth Fleet. Stand by for boarding coordination. We will transmit approach vectors and docking procedures shortly. She released the button. The transmission was sent. The words were out in the universe and could not be taken back. She turned to Tanaka. He was looking at her with an expression she had never seen on his face before. It might have been admiration. It might have been shock. It was probably both. "Haruki," she said quietly, so only he could hear. "Captain, what the actual hell just happened?" Tanaka opened his mouth, closed it, and then did something Renaa had never seen him do in 5 years of service together. He laughed. It started small, just a breath of disbelief pushed through his teeth. But it grew. And then Park laughed. And then the helmsman laughed. And then the whole bridge was laughing, not because anything was funny, but because the human brain, when faced with something truly impossible, sometimes has no other response. Renaa let them have 10 seconds. Then she stood up. "All right," she said, and the laughter stopped. "We have 12 enemy warships surrendering to us, and we are holding foam rounds and training paint. So let us figure this out. Tanaka, get Briggs on the line. Tell him his Marines just got promoted from drill to the real thing. And someone get Priya a new coffee mug." The Iron Precedent went back to work. There was a lot to do, and the day, it turned out, was not over yet. The next 6 hours were the strangest in the history of the UES Iron Precedent. Sergeant Major Briggs received the call from Tanaka and listened without interrupting. When Tanaka finished explaining the situation, there was a pause. Briggs looked down at his Marines, who were sitting around the bay in their training armor, covered in splotches of orange and blue paint, eating protein bars and comparing bruises from the drill. "Understood, Commander," Briggs said. "Give me 20 minutes." He cut the channel and turned to his people. 40 faces looked up at him. "Change of plans," he said. "We are conducting a real boarding operation. 12 Cathari warships have surrendered and we need to secure them." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Corporal Diaz had a protein bar halfway to her mouth. It stayed there. "Sergeant Major," one Marine said carefully, "did you say 12 warships?" "I did." "And we are securing them." "We are." "With foam rounds." Briggs paused. He looked at the racks of training ammunition, then at the racks of live ammunition on the other side of the bay. "Load live. Standard rules of engagement. But these people have surrendered, so I expect every single one of you to act with discipline and respect. If anyone causes a diplomatic incident, I will make you wish the Cathari had gotten to you first. Clear?" "Clear, Sergeant Major." "Then move." 15 minutes later, the first Marine shuttle crossed the gap between the Iron Precedent and the Cathari flagship. Briggs led the team personally. He had changed his armor and loaded live rounds, but he had not had time to fully clean the training paint off his chest plate. A smear of bright orange still marked his left shoulder like an accidental badge of honor. The airlock of the Throat of Silence opened, and Briggs stepped aboard the enemy flagship. The corridor was wide, built for beings taller and broader than humans. The walls were dark metal, covered in carved symbols that Briggs did not recognize. The air smelled different, heavier, older. Cathari officers lined the corridor, standing at attention. They were enormous, gray-skinned, four-armed, and every one of them looked down at the humans with expressions that mixed shame, fear, and something else that took Briggs a moment to identify. Relief. They were relieved. They had expected to die today, one way or another. Either in a battle they knew they would lose, or in the silence of shame after refusing to fight. Instead, they were alive, and the humans were treating them with a formality that surprised them. Briggs saluted the senior Cathari officer in the corridor. He did not know if Cathari saluted. He did not care. It was the right thing to do. "Sergeant Major Cole Briggs, United Earth Marines," he said. "We are here to process the surrender of this vessel in accordance with the Pale Accords. We will need your officers to assemble in a central area. No one will be harmed. You have my word." The Cathari officer stared at him. Then he looked at the orange paint on Briggs's shoulder. Then he looked back at Briggs's face. He returned the salute. All four arms rose and crossed over his chest in the Cathari gesture of respect. "We will cooperate," he said. Across the fleet, similar scenes played out. Marine teams boarded each Cathari ship, securing weapons, collecting data, and escorting crews to holding areas with a professionalism that none of them had expected to need today. They were gentle where they could be and firm where they had to be. Not a single shot was fired. Not a single fist was raised. 2 hours into the process, Warlord Ket was brought aboard the Iron Precedent. Renaa met him at the airlock. She had changed into her dress uniform, the one she kept pressed and ready for occasions that mattered. She stood straight and tall, even though Ket towered over her by nearly half a meter. "Warlord Ket," she said, "I am Captain Renaa Akafer. Welcome aboard." Ket studied her. His black eyes moved across her face, her uniform, the ship behind her. He was looking for something, information, understanding, some clue that would explain what had happened to him today. "Captain," he said, his translated voice was deep and careful, "I thank you for the honor you show my people." "You showed courage in your decision," Renaa said. "That deserves respect." She led him through the ship toward the secure meeting room that had been prepared. The route took them through the main corridor, past the crew quarters, past the mess hall, and past the Marine Bay. It was in the Marine Bay that everything changed. The bay doors were open. Inside, Renaa could see Marines sorting gear, stacking equipment, running the organized chaos of a crew that had gone from exercise to operation in no time at all. The after-action scoreboard from the drill was still displayed on the main screen. Blue and orange training paint still marked the walls and floor. Foam-round casings were piled in a bin near the door. Ket stopped walking. Renaa did not realize at first. She took 3 more steps before she noticed the silence behind her and turned around. Ket was standing in front of the open bay doors. He was staring at the scoreboard. His 4 arms hung at his sides. His face, which had been a mask of controlled dignity since he boarded the ship, was changing. The mask was cracking, piece by piece, as understanding settled into him like cold water filling a hole. He saw the scoreboard. He saw the training scores. He saw the columns for simulated kills and response time and drill rating. He saw the word exercise in large letters at the top of the display. He turned his head. He saw the foam rounds. He saw the paint. He saw a Marine walk past with a bright blue stain on her helmet, chatting with a friend about where they should eat dinner. He looked at Renaa. His black eyes were very wide. "This was not real," he said. "It was not a question." Renaa held his gaze. She considered for a brief moment whether to lie, whether to maintain the illusion, whether to let him believe that the drill had been a calculated response to his presence. She decided against it. He deserved the truth. He had surrendered his fleet with dignity, and she owed him honesty in return. "It was a training exercise," she said. "A standard combat readiness drill. We did not know you were there." Ket said nothing. He stood very still. His 4 arms tightened at his sides, and for a moment, Renaa thought she saw something break behind his eyes. Not anger, not humiliation, something deeper and quieter. The realization that everything he had feared about humans was not just true but was true in a way far worse than he had imagined. They had not prepared for him. They had not set a trap. They had not calculated and planned and positioned themselves to counter his fleet. They were just training. running a routine exercise, doing what they did every week, every month, every year. And it had been enough. It had been enough to terrify 12 warships and thousands of warriors into unconditional surrender. Not their best effort, not their full strength, just a regular Tuesday afternoon, and it had broken the will of the 9th Vanguard Fleet without a single shot being fired. Ket stood in silence for a long time. Then slowly he unclenched his fists. He looked at the scoreboard one more time. He looked at the foam rounds. He looked at the Marine with the blue paint on her helmet. "I see," he said quietly. He turned and continued walking. He said nothing more. CENTCOM's response arrived within hours. The capture of 12 Cathari warships without a single casualty was the largest bloodless acquisition in the history of the Cold War. Admirals and generals were scrambling to understand what had happened and how to make it happen again. Rena's report was simple and honest. She described the drill, the surrender, and the circumstances exactly as they occurred. She did not exaggerate. She did not embellish. The facts did not need help. In the weeks that followed, the story spread. It always does. Stories like this do not stay classified no matter how many people stamp them with red ink. Rena was promoted. Priya's jamming algorithm was classified at the highest level and integrated into every electronic warfare suite in the fleet. Briggs received a commendation and, more importantly to him, a bar tab at his favorite place on Earth. Dara Yoon and her Hellcats were featured in a recruitment campaign, though the details of what actually happened were carefully edited. The galactic reaction was immediate and widespread. Every species with a seat at the diplomatic table quietly updated their threat assessment of humanity, not because of a victory, but because of the absence of one. The humans had won a confrontation they did not even know they were in. A Cathari diplomatic journal entry, translated and placed in Earth's cultural archive, became the most widely shared document in galactic history. It read, "Other species build empires through conquest, through planning, through force, through the careful application of power over centuries. Humans do not do this. Humans build empires by accident. They do not try to be terrifying. They do not plan to be unbeatable. They simply are. Their training is their instinct. Their preparation is their nature. They practice war the way other species breathe, without thinking, without effort, without even knowing they are doing it. And that, more than any weapon, more than any fleet, more than any technology they possess, is why the galaxy will never be free of them. You cannot defeat an enemy who does not know they are fighting. You can only hope they never turn their full attention toward you." 6 months later, Rena sat in a bar on the coast of West Africa, watching the sun set over the Atlantic. Old friends surrounded her, drinks in hand, laughing at a story she was telling for the 3rd time because they kept asking to hear it again. She reached the end, the part where Ket stood in the Marine Bay staring at the training scoreboard, and her friends erupted. They slapped the table. They shook their heads. They asked the same question everyone asked. "How did you keep a straight face?" Rena smiled. She picked up her glass, finished the last of it, and set it down. "It was supposed to be a Tuesday," she said. Her friends laughed. The sun went down. The stars came out, bright and endless, full of species who had heard the story and would not forget it. Somewhere out there, in the dark between the stars, the next enemy was already thinking twice.